We have been tasked with recreating human society. I have missed those silly humans. I cannot wait until the lab guys finish growing the new batch. Our first task is to figure out the parameters for this thing called marriage.
The early 21st century political database says that marriage is between one man and one woman for the purpose of having children. If they can't have babies, they shouldn't marry.
Did they then not allow older couples to marry? That seems mean.
But in principle they could, like if they were younger.
But didn't the same group of people not want blacks and whites to marry in the mid-20th century and they could have babies, in principle?
That's different.
If you say so. Searching. The anthropological database provides multiple definitions for marriage that speak to the reasons for marriage.
And the number one reason in all human societies was to make babies, right?
Not exactly. It says here that it was about establishing a social identity for children which may or may not be related to the actual conception process.
This is an interesting database. It says that in many societies that marriage had an important economic function and among other things provided for division of labor in a household.
Don't forget about the regulation of sexual relationships.
Do you mean who they can and cannot have sex with?
Yes. Do you think gay marriages could do these things?
I do not see why not. But would it not be the first time for humans to have a marriage that was not one man and one woman?
According to the anthropological database, many human societies practiced polygamy where there were multiple spouses. You even see it in the Bible book. Certain politicians cited to argue for one man, one woman.
Looking at the database, it looks like one form was polygyny in which one man could have several wives. But wouldn't each marriage be one man and one woman even though the man was in multiple marriages?
He could be, but there's evidence that in some societies, co-wives would cooperate economically. So that suggests that the marriages were not completely separated from one another.
Polyandry even more so suggests that marriage was not always one man and one woman. It was rare, very rare, but when it occurred it was found mostly in Nepal. In that society a woman would marry a group of brothers. It could be as many as 5 men and 1 woman in that marriage. And it was not 5 separate marriages and 5 separate households.
Right. The point was to keep the household property together through the generations.
But that is all the database has about marriage, right? Because even if there were multiple wives or multiple husbands, marriage was always between men and women.
Searching. Here we are. No.
Pass the file to me. I see. The historical database makes reference to the medieval practice of covenants, of which marriage was of one type. Other covenants, like a binding of men as brothers, were same-sex.
But that might not have been marriage as such.
Here in the anthropological database, we have a group of African people called the Nuer. They had a form of marriage that focused on giving a child a social identity.
Yes, I see. Here it says that if a patrilineage was coming to an end, then one of the daughters of the house would take the role of husband and marry a woman. The daughter would probably have a husband of her own and would return to him after the ceremony.
The wife would take on lovers, and when she became pregnant, everyone would say the baby had a ghost father and the baby would belong to the patrilineage.
Okay, but in that case, the woman was a symbolic man. Or in the very least it was a non-sexual same-sex marriage.
Searching the database for other examples. Searching. Here we are. The Zand had a form of same-sex marriage that emphasized economic cooperation.
Yes. Market women who had husbands and were busy with their market work would marry a woman to do household chores. But did they have sex with their wives?
There is no mention of it in the database, so it looks like there is another form of non-sexual same-sex marriage. Were there any sexual same-sex marriage?
The database of North American Indians refers to two-spirited people among the Plains Indians. They were sometimes called Burdash. They were biological men who live as women and even married men.
Yes, what anthropologists call a third gender. They would not marry each other. But did they have sex with their husbands?
Yes, they did. Although some Burdash had sex with both men and women. Searching for similar practices in other cultures. Searching. The Indonesian warrior.
Another third gender. There is some report of Pria marrying men and behaving like a wife in all respects. So a sexual same-sex marriage.
Yes. Another note says that there was an expectation among the warrior that if the husband wanted children and so wanted to marry a woman, that he had to ask the warrior's permission.
Just as if the first wife was a woman. These people were mostly Muslim, so multiple wives were allowed even if it was rare.
And the husband was expected to set up a separate house for his warrior wife and his woman wife, just as is required for two woman wives in Islam.
Was warrior marriage recognized by the religious leaders? Were they married by one?
No, nor did the government recognize it, but in society they were generally recognized. In fact, it was more acceptable to be a married warrior man couple living together than to be an unmarried hetero couple living together.
Okay, so it is clear that marriage was not one man plus one woman in all times and all places.
Yes, so we can allow multiple forms in the recreated human society.